Welcome to Skip the Queue, a podcast for people working in or working with visitor attractions. I'm your host, Kelly Molson. Each episode, I speak with industry experts from the attractions world. In today's episode, I speak with Robbie Jones, Insights Analyst Lead at Katapult. We discuss how to create a unique visitor attraction, what you need to know before you start, and what the leisure and attractions market is looking like post-COVID. If you like what you hear, subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and all the usual channels by searching Skip the Queue. Robbie!
Hello.
Welcome to Skip the Queue. I'm really excited to have you on today. Thank you for joining me for the first episode of season 4.
I know, what an honour. What an honour. I can't believe it. I've been chosen first.
You're the chosen one. Oh, well, you say it's an honour now, but you might not appreciate it after I've got you with these icebreaker questions.
Oh, good.
I've actually got some new ones this season. So I've been asking our lovely former guests and our Twitter followers to send me in some new ones because I felt like the old ones were getting a bit tired. So I'm going to whack you with some of the new ones and see how we get on.
Okay, here goes.
I have to say, this is one of my favourite ones.
Okay.
It might date us slightly as well. You can only save one of the Muppets. Which one do you choose and why?
I think Kermit.
Okay.
He's just iconic, isn't he? And I think my first memory of Kermit is when they did their version of A Christmas Carol. The thought of Kermit doing that was amazing. So yeah,
Okay.
got to be Kermit.
Yeah, it's a classic. He's a classic, isn't he? He's quite legendary. All right,
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good answer. Next one. If you could enter the Olympics for anything, what would you be Olympic level at? And we're not just talking sports here. This could be sports related, but it could be like baking, moaning. What are you saying?
I think I see myself as a bit of a jack of all and master of none. Maybe I'm like a decathlete, something like that, where I'm good at a few things, but I'm not amazing at one big thing.
What we like, when we go back to like sports day at school, what was the thing that you would do at sports day?
It was probably like the long distance running. I seem to do a lot of cross country. We used to call it in our school, which went from tarmac to a muddy path in about 5 minutes. So I don't know how cross country that was, but yeah, sort of like long distance running. I can't stand it now. I can't stand the noise of breathing, of me heavy breathing as I struggle up a hill. That's just not a sound anybody wants to listen to. So
oh, you've really made me laugh. So the only thing I can think about when I'm running is breathing, and now all I'm going to hear is myself breathing and think about Robbie and not wanting to do it. Okay, final one.
Yeah. What
movie can you rewatch over and over and over again, and how many times have you watched this movie that you're about to tell me?
So I think for an absolute nostalgia, it'd have to be Dumb and Dumber, because the amount of bonding that me and my younger brother have done over that film is just immense. I think we reference it every time we speak to one another. It's just become part of our psyche, part of our relationship. So we've probably watched it dozens of times between us. But it gets referenced at least 3 times a week.
Oh, it's a great film.
Jim Carrey.
He's great, isn't he? Are you going to do so if we do the song? Mark.
Yeah.
Ing.
Yeah.
Bird.
I can't believe I'm doing this.
This is the level. This is the level
brilliant.
That this show has got to, folks. This is what we got up to on our summer break. And I loved that film. And my friends were really obsessed with Ace Ventura films as well. Jim Carrey cannot be.
Yeah, comedy icon, amazing. I love him to pieces.
Oh, Robbie, I can't believe I just made you do that. So sorry, I've lost it now. Right, unpopular opinion. What you got for us?
Right. I don't think eating chocolate and fruit should go together. It's not right. I'll draw a line. Fruit and nut in terms of like a chocolate bar, like dried fruits and I'm okay with. But when it's like fresh, juicy things like grapes and strawberries going with chocolate, I just can't stand it at all.
What, not like a little fondue at a wedding?
No,
Little chocolate fondue?
no, it just no. Like you wouldn't mix milk with water and drink it, and that's kind of what I feel like when I'm eating chocolate and fruit together. So yeah, whoever has got the largest fondue rental company, please stop, because I don't like it.
Wow. Okay. No. I feel like that's quite controversial. The milk and water thing actually turned my stomach when you said that. So I was like, oh no, you wouldn't, would you?
There you go. Again, the next time you eat a fondue, just think of me and start gagging, probably, as I would.
Wow, what a note to start the podcast on. We've really taken this to a whole new level today, haven't we? Excellent. Right, Robbie, you are the lead insights analyst at Katapult.
Yeah.
And I want to come back in a minute to talk about what your job entails. But first, Katapult itself. So a little story for you. So years ago, when you're at school and you have to pick like work experience, my granddad had a business, and his next door neighbour's business made props for films, right? Nice. So I bagged myself work experience at this place, and I got to make like loads. I just got to make weird stuff that then ended up in like films. And I remember going to the cinema, watching the film, going, I made that Hessian box there. I sewed that. Woo, that was really good. If I could go back now and go, no, like this is where I want to go and do work experience, I would choose Katapult without a doubt, because you do incredible things. Tell the listeners what Katapult does. It's so cool.
Yeah, sure. So we design themed attractions and experiences. We do it the world over, and it could be something as small as a little pop-up street food courtyard that we did a couple of years ago, right to a large-scale full theme park design and everything in between. And it's great. It's really, really fun. We get to work with some amazing clients, some amazing brands and IPs, where the design team are just in their element. They're able to work with brands like Lego that they've grown up playing with since they was small boys and girls. So it's fantastic for us all to kind of carry on being a kid, really, in essence, being creative, being surrounded by colour and fun and entertainment. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. A lot of extended hours, red-eye flights across the world, but it's amazing. It's amazing to be a part of. And design some pretty amazing things that are either coming soon or already open. So yeah, we do a lot, and we're
so exciting. I feel like you played it down a little bit there as well. Like you were like, yeah, we design like attractions and experiences. I was like, yeah, you do. It's really exciting. What do you do specifically there? Because you're on kind of lead insights and analyst is your job title. Yeah. So you're kind of the data that sits behind that, right? The research that sits behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think something that we've been in the industry for over 20 years now, and gradually that we've seen that actually it's really good to make sure you've got some sort of insight, believe it or not, to make a very good decision. And it was something that was kind of lacking within the industry. There was lots of big thinking, feasibility reports, people telling you what the commercial outcomes would be to improve a visitor attraction or even to open a new attraction. But no one was really saying, well, hold on a minute, who is it that you're trying to get through the doors, and what is it that they actually want, and have they actually got the money to spend that you're charging for? And that's the kind of the bit of the insights gap that I and we at Katapult sort of fill. We understand the sheer importance of having that insights. We can't just design something from scratch full stop, regardless of whether we're working with an IP or not. You've got to have an idea of who are the people coming through the door. So that sheer responsibility lays flat on my shoulders to make sure that whatever the design team designs next, it is fully in line, not just commercially, but from a guest point of view as well, that they are going to love it from the moment they walk in. So yeah, pretty big responsibility, but it's fantastic to sort of set the design team up to let them creative minds go wild.
So it is fascinating what you do, and I think that it's really similar to probably the bit that I do in our business, because my role is to understand what the client's challenges is, and so you are asking all of the questions around, well, like, who's your consumer, where, like, what do they spend, where do they do, where do they go, what do they read, etc., and then you translate the designers, they get to do the fun bit, but I think that the research bit is the fun bit, to be honest. They would probably argue with me. So how do you start that process? What are the kind of things that you're asking?
Well, I guess it depends on the client, depends on the project, but the way we typically start for existing visitor attractions is we kind of do a mystery shop. We call it a guest experience audit. But what we don't just go around and have fun, that's kind of the second part of the day. The first part of the day is thinking about, if you've got signs telling interpretation and you're a museum, are they at the right height for kids to read it? If it is it the right level of language required for a 5, 6, 7-year-old to be able to read it? And everything in between, is the staff levels good? Are there plenty of vegetarian options within the cafe facilities? All of these things where we want to make sure every touch point, that every guest that comes through is satisfied. And our audit kind of goes in, it pulls out the good stuff, but more importantly for the operators, it pulls out the stuff where they could probably do a little bit better. It's the things that are probably mentioned more than often on TripAdvisor. And so it gives us the chance to go, right, yes, we did find these issues. These need solving as soon as possible. So let's get to work. Let's get to work in figuring out what we can do. And, sort of 75% of the time, those things that we highlight, they can pretty much be done by the attraction themselves. It's only the other 25% where we go, right, your guests aren't staying for 4 hours and you want them to stay for 4 hours, they're only staying for 2. What can we do to make the experience last twice as long? What can we do to keep them there and engaged and immersed for double the amount of time that they are before? And that's obviously when we get the design team's creative juices flowing and start to think about, what can we do to improve the attraction? So yeah, in a roundabout way, the guest experience audit kind of helps to unlock the insights, helps to give us the ammunition we need to kind of improve the attraction, and also look to work on some bigger projects with the client as well. So yeah, that's like a roundabout way in terms of how we do it with the audit.
I love that. So it's not just about, it isn't, from your perspective, it's not just about creating new, it's not just about adding on, it's about looking at it from a holistic perspective. Where are you already? How are you performing? Okay, well, look, this is doing really well. That's great. These things need to improve. And then, okay, so now let's look at the new stuff. Because I guess there's always that excitement about new, isn't there? Like, a new attraction, a new I don't know, show that you're going to put on within it, and that's what gets everyone excited. Sometimes they forget to take that step back and go, but what needs to improve with what we already have?
Yeah, absolutely. And the greatest assets that visitor attractions have probably got are sat there already. They just need discovering. And what we tend to find is if it's not something tangible, like a ride needs improving, or an experiential walking trail needs improving, it kind of falls down to the narrative or the storytelling of the attraction. That seems to be the thing that we're coming across at the moment, which is probably leaves a little bit left to be desired. People don't explain their stories enough. That, why are they unique? Why are they telling us this story when you go into a museum? Or why has this art centre got this curation of art? People aren't very good at telling stories that guests want to listen to. So, you're right. It's not always about the new, it's about the existing, but extrapolating what's good about that experience in the first place.
You wrote a really good article that I read a couple of weeks ago called Creating Unique Visitor Destinations in a Crowded Market. So I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes, but it's on Katapult's website as well. Yeah. You said that attractions need to capitalize on what is unique about them. And that's not just from the perspective of, hey, we've got this mascot and this is, how we're going to, this is how we're going to put it around the site. It's like, but what is the location unique? Is the food offering that you have based on that location? Like, what is it about you that really stands out that guests can't get anywhere else, and they're not going to get the same story anywhere else? I thought that was such a great way of looking at the uniqueness of each attraction.
Yeah, and I think there's always going to be a place for attractions that have got the fastest thing, the tallest thing, the biggest thing. That does a lot to pull a crowd. But when it comes to trying to fight your corner, if you're a sort of a medium or smaller size visitor attraction, you've got to pull on your unique. There's a finite source of money and time, so you're going to have to try and get your visitors and your guests a slightly different way. The article came from kind of an issue that was within two strands of the industry. The first being museums and art galleries that were struggling from a values perspective to say, we can't take this donation because it doesn't fit in with our values, or museums having to give away certain artifacts back to countries because of the connotations of it being stolen in today's what is seen in today's society. So they're under huge pressure to say, well, what is our story? What is our narrative? And for places like that, it is very much rooted in the locality. What is your city about? What is your region about? And curating around that. The second strand is around experiences that have got a blueprint and are looking to create dozens of the same attraction all around the world. Again, there is absolutely a place for that in this world. We've got countless clients who do the same thing. But where there needs to be a differentiation is how that impacts how the local market impacts what that attraction is. You can't just say, we're going to have an indoor attraction that's going to have a soft play and a cafe, and that's kind of it. And then we're going to put it throughout, 40 different countries around the world. It's not going to wash. You can't just put a badge on the front of that indoor attraction and say, welcome to Tokyo, welcome to Orlando. It's just not going to work. It's not going to wash. It is not unique enough. So for those attractions, it's about, yes, you've got a blueprint, but what can you do differently based on the people, the profile, the guests that are going to come through that door to make it slightly tweaked in terms of things that they might not have from a local competitor point of view, or just making sure that you replicate their stories within the attraction. I've seen some really good stuff that Crayola have done in the US, where they're starting to onboard local artists for their entertainment centers. That's amazing. You could be in the US, go to the two different Crayolas, and you'd have a different experience. So being able to create that unique experience is kind of twofold, but it's one that everyone's got to look at quite a bit now.
And does it? So one of the things I thought was quite interesting is the scale of the projects that you work on at Katapult. So, for example, I think you mentioned earlier the Derby Marketplace project, which is like a pop-up like marketplace, and then you've worked with organisations like the Sea Life, London Aquarium. Like, they're really different experiences. Do you look at the same approach when you're working with those that kind of scale of client?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with those two examples, there was a very clear commercial goal for both of them. For Sea Life, it was about adding an experience that makes the ticket price value for money, but it's also there to increase photographic and merchandise sales as well. So there was a very clear understanding of what the commercial goal was. For Derby Marketplace, that was actually a pop-up, as I said, a pop-up courtyard that was set up in 2020, just after the first lockdown of the pandemic in the UK. Derby is our home city, and we was approached by the city council to do something that will support the local businesses. Because there was obviously restaurants, cafes going bust because they simply couldn't do a takeaway service because they didn't have the outdoor catering. So for that, we created a courtyard. So as a result, they both had commercial goals, and we both started them pretty much the same way, which is, right, well, who is it that's going to come through the door? Who is it? What do they want? Is it a family of four? Is it a couple? How much money have they got? What sort of experience are they used to? How long are they going to stay? What information are they going to want? All of this sort of information that I guess sometimes we take for granted in the attractions industry, feed it into the design, and then ultimately come up with exactly what we did for the marketplace and Sea Life. So yeah, I think by and large, we kind of stick along the same path. Very much insights driven design. We do the insights, we design it based on that, and then we hope it reaches the commercial goal.
So you mentioned Crayola a minute ago. That is a brilliant example of really using the locality to make that attraction individual. What other great examples of like really truly unique attractions can you think of?
Well, I think I mentioned it in the article you've already mentioned, but Meow Wolf, particularly the first one in Santa Fe, that is an absolute benchmark that I use in terms of how you use local talent, local immersion, to help make Santa Fe a destination in its own right. It's amazing how much one attraction can kind of pivot the way that a region is seen, a city is seen, and turns it into a place that people are, staying overnight for 2 or 3 nights to go to Meow Wolf. So definitely that in terms of creating a destination. But I do want to pull out another example as well, and it's not necessarily unique as such, but the feeling is unique, and that is Paulton's Park. So for those that have been to Paulton's, Peppa Pig World is there, which is a massive pool. They've got some great rides, they've got some really good food and beverage outlets, a good smattering of live performances. But what makes the park stand out is how immaculate it is when it comes to public realm. The gardens are fantastic, the landscaping's amazing. You'd be hard troubled to find a piece of litter on the floor. The staff are so incredibly attentive with attention to detail that actually, when I've gone a few times now, it's the one thing that always stands out to me, and it's the benchmark for just cleanliness. You could be forgiven for being in a communist China. It's sort of like very clean and orderly and focused, but actually, when we think about visiting a theme park, we want it to be glossy and clean and, not a bother in the world. And it's little things like that for me that have made Paulton's like an absolute benchmark as well for us.
Wow. That, because I always think back to Disney about that, and like no litter, everything was like beautiful gardens. And that for me is like the level. I haven't had the pleasure of Paulton's Park yet. I think I've got a couple more years and then it'll be
yes,
it'll be on my list.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll find out just how much you can spend in that store with Peppa Pig.
Oh god, yeah, I can imagine. Let's talk about summer, and let's talk about what the attractions market looks like at the moment. So I know that you've had an incredibly busy summer. I mean, we're still, as we're recording this, we're still like at the tail end of it. So I can imagine that it's you're looking forward to a little bit of a rest.
Yes,
come
definitely.
September, October time. How is the attractions market looking at the moment to you post-COVID? Because I guess we've moved on, so to speak, from COVID, or the majority of people have kind of moved on from it. But I think it's really difficult with attractions because we are still seeing a slight decline in visitor numbers. But there's obviously other factors going on at the moment in terms of, the energy crisis and energy crisis and things like that. So what are you finding, or what's your view of the kind of leisure and attractions market at the moment?
I think post-COVID, if we think about the start of the year, I think it was incredibly buoyant. I think attractions have seen the opportunity to invest now. The staycation market has absolutely boomed during the times when international travel around the world was banned. So it means that there's been a strong staycation market, which is really, really good. I think for the UK in particular, it's making sure, and this isn't just the attractions industry, I think this goes across the whole staycation market of the UK. Don't get so greedy. There's a lot of, I understand that demand is high and you want to capitalize on it, but if we want to keep the UK as a staycation destination, you can't be charging silly prices compared to what they could probably do as an all-inclusive for 10 days in Mallorca, as an average in terms of what the family's going to do. You've got to offer some sort of value for money. And the cost of living is the big thing now. I think that's what we're seeing. COVID is kind of is there in the background, and it's obviously affected things, but the cost of living is the one that's really starting to bite a little bit more now. And I think it's because although we saw a lot of drop in wealth during the COVID pandemic, actually the cost of living now is probably a harder time for a lot of people, because the savings have already been taken up by, making sure they've got income coming in or topping up furlough or whatever it was. So it's the cost of living is the big thing. People aren't going to go out and spend, I don't know, 200, 300 quid on a day at a theme park. I can't see it happening. If they do, they'll have to forego something else. And I think that's something that's got to be in the mind's eye of visitor attractions. And I think we're starting to see like a homogenized view of what we mean by leisure and attractions. Shopping centres now want to get in on the act and have lots of entertainment. You've got places like Butlins and Pontins in the UK, so typical caravan hotel resorts that have built live entertainment and experiences around them. They are in direct competition with theme parks and visitor attractions because they're offering entertainment. So the more experiences are spread throughout our sphere of what we can and can't do, the less money there is to go around. So even more of a need for people to be a little bit more unique and think about it's not just what's going to get me to this theme park. It's why would they choose the theme park over X, Y, and Z? And as I always say, option Z could be sitting at home and watching Netflix. Yeah, you've got to do something to get people off the sofa. So I'd
not considered that option Z could be Butlins or Pontins, though. That has just blown my mind, because we've the whole way through the pandemic we've been saying, your competition is Netflix, it's Disney Plus, but I hadn't even considered that now people are looking at how they spend that excess cash and how they spend their holiday time. Butlins is a competitor for Alton Towers.
Yeah, in that comparison, absolutely. It's just that they've gone about things in opposite directions. Butlins went from accommodation to experiences, and Alton Towers vice versa. But they are very, very much competitors these days. And if you had £500 as a family to spend for a weekend, where would you go? And actually, you look at the offers of both of those examples, and depending on what sort of family you are and what sort of things you like to do, it might be a hard decision to make, but ultimately it'll be the one, it won't be the both.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you said that you have seen attractions investing in new rides and experiences to kind of capitalize on that staycation. What do you think attractions should be doing right now based on what we've just discussed, this kind of competitive state that you're in?
It sounds really cliche, but I think it's just have a long-term view on things. I can say this from doing insights here at Catapult, but when we're looking at data and trends and audiences, we're not just looking over the last 12 months. We're looking 5 or 10 years in the past and 5 and 10 years in the future to get a really good outlook in terms of, well, what do we think people are going to do? Obviously, you can't always guess what's going to happen. I think the last few years have taught us that. But you can have some sort of a vision in terms of where you want to go. Where do visitor attractions want to be in 10 years' time? I'd love to know how many attractions know that answer. If they know it, then that's fantastic, because they'll be gradually building towards that. But I guess what we've seen from our side at Catapult is that we've gone to a lot of visitor attractions around the world that are doing a fantastic job at iterating, whether they've got a theme park or museum or whatever it is, but it's kind of all bundled together in kind of like a big mound of plasticine with lots of different colors attached and different shapes, and it does a job, but it doesn't feel like the same place. And if we're treating that as the elixir of the visitor attraction, then that you need to get to the point of, well, what is your 10-year goal? If you know that, you know what you're going towards, and I'd certainly focus on that if you've got a little bit of spare time.
I mean, yeah, they're not busy at the minute. It's just been through something like they should be resting now. Summer's done. That's really hard, though, isn't it? So an example of that locally to me. So I live near a vineyard. There's a lovely vineyard about 15-minute walk from my house called Saffron Grange. Just give them a little plug because it is phenomenal. They've been selling their wines since 2019. However, the vineyards were planted like 11 years before that. And so they have had to have the vision of whatever they were planting and however they were designing that plot of land that they have. They had to think about it's phenomenal, the things they had to think about, what trees they would plant, because that's how high they would grow, that would shield those vineyards from the wind and those vineyards from the frost. And just the granular level of planning that's had to go into that place to make the wine and the grapes now to be at the best they possibly can, it blows my mind. But it's the same thing with a visitor attraction, right? You've got to have that vision to go, well, this is my idea and this is how we're going to develop it over that time. But you've got the factor of not really knowing what your customers are going to want at that point. With the vineyard, at least they know relatively, like, other than like wind and rain influences and, weather that you can't predict, they kind of know how those vines are going to grow and what they're going to get at the end of it. With an attraction, you've got multiple different audiences with multiple different opinions on what they want and what their needs are. Throw in a global pandemic. How do you even do that? Like, I can't comprehend how you do that.
I think, we get caught up sometimes in thinking that a 10-year vision or a goal or whatever you want to call it has to be numerical or it has to be very definitive in terms, we want to be the number one theme park in the world. Like, those sorts of things, you kind of, you're almost hamstrung by. But what about if you said that you wanted your visitor attraction to be the most inspiring creative place for kids under 10? That is a vision. Yeah. That is a vision that you can build towards. And if things change, whether it's your audience or your local competitors or whatever it is, you can still build towards that vision because that's what you believe in. It's about having a sense of what your values are as a business or as an attraction, standing by them, making that vision a reality by saying, right, we're going to do this because we believe in it. And that, again, ties really nicely back into what creates a unique attraction. It's your values. And I think it's the same for every business. We're seeing it a lot more now in the wider business community, where people are making a choice over values instead of cost, although the cost of living is obviously exacerbating that slightly. But people are making choices on green energy instead of fossil fuels, for example. So visitor attractions are only going to go the same way. It's a big one. Yeah, you're right. 10 years. If you don't know your 10-year vision, then you don't know how to get there over the next 10 years. So
I love
get
that.
it sorted.
So just put that to the top of the list, attractions. No, but now I guess that's a good place to be now, isn't it? You've just come through that really, really hectic summer period. Now, the run up to Christmas, bar a few events and things that will happen, it's a time for planning for next year. So now is a really good time to be able to kind of take that step back and go, okay, well, what is our vision? Do we need to revisit our values and vision? And then that will make the planning for 2023 a hell of a lot clearer. Okay, one last question on this, because what if attractions are already doing really well at the moment? Because we've got attractions, outdoor attractions, that have been smashing it, right? So what if your attractions are at capacity? What then do you do? So you're looking at things like planning the expansions, things like that. Like what can they do?
I think there's one of two routes that are seeming quite popular at the minute. I think one is to, if you look at places like Gravity and Put Shack, a few others that have escaped my mind, by almost franchising. If you think you've got a concept that is completely unique and can be spread throughout the UK, Europe, worldwide, then now's the opportunity to look at it. I think it needs some careful consideration. As we said before, you can't just copy and paste. But if you think you've got something pretty amazing, then go for it. Well, why not open a second or a third or a fourth? You've proven it can work. So, try it. it's worth a go. And I guess the second thing, and this is something where I think the bigger museums during the pandemic have really led the chase on this. So I think it was the museum, it was one of the museums in London, I can't remember what, but they introduced museum lates, where they did silent discos around the exhibits. Right, this is a perfect time to try completely different things. If you've got an out of season, or you've got low throughput days or weeks or weekends, then what can you do to bring in another audience? Let's try and fill up your throughput and your dwell time of your attraction 100% of the year round. If you can do that, then you're making more from the asset that's already making you money. So try it out, find new guest profiles, find new groups of audiences that might want to visit, and consider doing something very special for them. And you never know, if it works out, then you've got an extra revenue stream that you didn't think you had. So they'd be my preference if I was in that fortunate position to go down one of those two routes.
Great advice, thank you. We're going to put all of Robbie's contact details, etc., all in the show notes. So if you fancy a chat with him, you want to find out a little bit more about what Katapult do, you want to book yourself one of those, oh God, I've forgotten the words, one of the audit is the word, if you'd like to book yourself one of those audits. So you can do that. I would love to know about a book though, Robbie. So we always offer up a guest's book choice as a prize. And it could be something that you love. It can be something that's helped shape your career in some way. What do you have for us today?
Gosh, can I pick two?
I mean, it's double my marketing spend, but why not? The first one.
Good. Fantastic. So I think one that's kind of a personal one is by Ernest Hemingway, The Sun Also Rises. It's a lovely, in-depth read about the 20s and 30s, where cafe culture was rife, and artists and poets were making adventurous trips to France and Spain to soak up the culture. And it's a wonderful, wonderful story that kind of really makes me want to live 90 years from now and really enjoy it. I think that's the first part. The second part is that Ernest Hemingway used to be a journalist, so his descriptions of the characters are very matter of fact, and I think that's kind of seeped into my kind of like audience profiling that I do as part of my job. I like the matter of fact. I like the facts that make the people real, and then start to tell the story of what we think they're going to do in an attraction. So I think Ernest Hemingway certainly had an influence on me. And then the second book is called Super Forecasting, which is by Philip Tatlock and Dan Gardner. Now, this it came to prominence a little bit when Dominic Cummings was advisor to Boris Johnson in his ill-fated stay at number 10 Downing Street. And it speaks about the art and science of prediction and getting things right. And I read it from end to end. I completely soaked this book up. It's a little bit culty in places, so you've got to take a bit of pinch of salt. But it's good at kind of teaching you to say, right, can you be a super forecaster? And funny enough, I think it was February or March this year, they put out a bold statement that Vladimir Putin was not going to enter Ukraine under any circumstances, at least for the next 6 to 9 months. And then I think it was about 2 weeks later, and he invaded. So I think that example of the book, it kind of comes with a moral, I think, which is you can super forecast or try and super forecast as much as you want, but you've got absolutely no way of deciding what's going to work. You know, there's a difference between a good and a bad decision and a good and a bad outcome, and I think that's what that book's taught me.
Yeah, I mean, that example did not sell that book for me at all. However, that sounds great. That sounds like a really good book. You've absolutely blown my marketing budget again, which everybody always does. But no, I love the example of Ernest Hemingway, and I love how it's infiltrated the way that you do your work as well. I haven't read either of those books, so they're going to go on my list. And actually, listeners, we do compile a list of all of the books that all of our guests suggest, and you can find that over on the Rubber Cheese website, rubbercheese.com. Go to the Insights, it's in there. Robbie, thank you. As ever, if you want to win Robbie's books, if you go over to our Twitter account and you retweet this show announcement with the words, "I want Robbie's books," then you will be in with a chance of winning both of them. I've loved our little chat. Thank you. Thank you for indulging in my little song at the beginning as well.
Oh gosh, I'm just glad that you didn't get me to do the scene where he's peeing into a bottle in Germany. So,
I don't think that would have worked very well on the podcast, do you?
No. I'm sure you can add some trickle sounds in.
Yeah,
if you wanted to.
End there, shall we? It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Skip the Queue. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find us. And remember to follow us on Twitter for your chance to win the books that have been mentioned. Skip the Queue is brought to you by Rubber Cheese, a digital agency that builds remarkable systems and websites for attractions that helps them increase their visitor numbers. You can find show notes and transcriptions from this episode and more over on our website, rubbercheese.com/podcast.